City Center?
Oh, Michigan.
Yes.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the May 19th, 2014 City of Joliet Pre-Council meeting. Honorable Tom Girani presiding.
Start with roll call. Mayor Durrani.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin. Here. Councilman Girl.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman McFarland.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Odekirk.
Here.
Councilwoman Quillman. Here. Councilman Turk.
Here.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Want to adjust the agenda a little bit to accommodate some of the people that are here for presentations. And we have a petitioner for a liquor license, so we'll start off with that.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. A public hearing was held on May 13th, 2014 for the issuance of a new Class A liquor license at 3151 Voyager Lane, doing business as Sammy's Lounge, Inc., Anthony's Bar and Restaurant. No citizens appeared in support or opposition. The applicants are Sebastos, Maria, and Anthony Holastos of Joliet. There are no outstanding monies owed to the city. The building, fire, and police departments approve of the license. However, the previous licensee put a strain on the resources of the Joliet Police Department with over 200 calls for service to this address over 3 years. Because of this, JPD is recommending that if you grant the license to them, it should be closely monitored. And if there's any sign of a return to this activity under the new license holders, they are to be brought before the Liquor Commission for disciplinary hearings. And also, if the license is granted by the council, it will be held until final inspections by both the building and fire departments. And we have representatives, the applicants actually, and their attorney with us if they wish to address the
Tier.
council at all.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, John Tira on behalf of the petitioner. My business address is 285 South Broadway, Coastal Bay, Illinois. I'm a longtime friend of Mr. Sebastos. He's seeking to reestablish a business that he started in 1994. If he transferred or leased the building and sold the business in 2001, if you check back, there's been no problems prior to the date that he surrendered it. We had to force the landlord out by filing a lawsuit, and Mr. Holastos is expending a significant amount of money rehabbing the whole place inside and out. So if the council has any questions.
I just want to point out that he had a business in town, but just come up during the hearing on the corner of Theodore and Rayner, I believe. He had a liquor establishment.
Correct.
And he also had one in Lockport at one time. Yes. Sure.
So is this going to be also, it's for consumption and package, so you guys are going to have a liquor store in there, or?
No, it's going to be a restaurant, basically.
Restaurant.
And bar.
Package, they can sell a six-pack of beer, whatever, yes, yes.
It's not going to be a,
Yes, it's going to be packaged liquor and a
but
restaurant.
it's not going to be a liquor store.
No, no,
Mayor,
yeah.
what will be the maximum capacity?
250.
Okay, so we got, I know on the previous, one of the previous owners, we had some problems with and miscommunications, we'll just say to be
Right.
polite, but we're all on the same page now, so 250?
Yes. Anybody else?
Yeah, Mayor.
Sure.
This question's for Jim. Jim, as the liquor commissioner deputy, did you do any checking on the business in Lockport to see if there were any issues?
We did not check on the business in Lockport, but the previous license that they held, it's now just one more, the bar at the corner of Theodore and Rayner. There wasn't, you did not have a history of problems, even though it was quite a few years ago that they owned it.
And there's nothing, no problems at just one more?
Well, that's a whole
Any
new
calls for
licensee now, but when they owned it, there were no
That's
issues.
what I was asking, when they owned it. Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, at this time, no entertainment, no music or...
Correct.
No entertainment, no late hours, just normal hours, restaurant and liquor license, right?
I would so move.
You can't vote on it tonight.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Right.
Monday,
I forgot.
Tuesday vote. Monday question.
All right.
Councilman
Anybody else?
Quillman,
Wait a minute.
his license in Coast Island in Lockport was 1986.
Jim?
I just really quick, I guess my only concern, I would say, is the packaged liquor portion of it. Just, can you explain? Because there's not, according to the report, there's none around that area that has that. So
Similar to the-
if the late hours, someone leave, they're gonna leave, what, get a six-pack, a bottle of booze? Just how does that work?
Similar to the Double J on Essington, they also have a Class A. And the truth of the matter is, if you ask any of the bars that do have it, they don't do the volume of a traditional liquor store. But there are a few in the city that do have the Class A, and the one that comes to mind the quickest is the Double J.
Is this contingent on the success of the business, the package? I'm just curious, because previously it did not have an A license there.
Yes, it did.
Are you sure?
Sammy's did have.
Sammy's did have, yeah,
They did.
same one, yes.
The previous one? with
Previous one,
Sula?
we had all the problems with, had an
Had
A
A,
license,
all right.
yes, yes.
Hey, one more question, Mayor.
Sure.
What type of restaurant would you describe this as?
The type of restaurant would be modern American, Greek cuisine, Mediterranean cuisine, similar to like a Houlihan's. Been to one of those, ranging from several types of different types of burgers, sandwiches, all the way to steaks, seafood.
Well, the only reason I ask is we have other restaurants in that area, and free competition is fantastic, but Councilman McFarland brought up a good point. What if the other restaurants, because of the edge of competition, should want to have packaged liquors?
Then they need to apply, and we would have a hearing and present it to the council, because
Right.
that's how it gets passed.
All right, thank you.
I did cut back on the extra hour and the entertainment because of the previous problem we had. And they have 90 to 120 days for me to check their history, so.
What would be the hours of operation?
Monday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 1 a.m. Friday, Saturday, 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. and then Sunday, 11 a.m. to midnight.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else?
Yes.
No.
What is the purpose of selling packaged liquor if you're going to have a nice restaurant there?
Well, we just have,
Good luck.
we just wanted to have the license is in the case, something, business, it's extra. That's
I know, but
mean,
I've been
but
in
if
plenty
it's-
of restaurants where they don't sell 6 packs of beer out of their bar. And if it's going to be a nice restaurant, I'm a little miffed by this, because my thought on this, if people can go in there and buy a 6-pack of beer, it's right there at the mall. They can go there in the parking lot and drink it and then go back and buy more, and then you've got a nuisance problem.
Okay, it's no problem. If it's not, if it's a big problem, we don't care. We don't do it. I mean, I was just all the time, even the 3 places I own, I have also a package, And it was convenient for a customer come in the evening, have a couple of beers, and get a 6-pack to go.
But weren't they just bars? Or were those also restaurants?
No, it was just the bars.
They were just bars.
Bar.
That's the difference.
Yes, yes.
When he ran it originally from
Yeah.
1995 to 2001, he had full service food. He did a lot of food service.
Why don't both of you give your name for the records, please, and address? Yeah.
Anthony Holastos, address is 607 Sierra Row Circle, Joliet.
Sebastos Holastos, the same address.
Thank you, thank you. Any other questions?
Just want to make sure they understand what the chief of police said. Any issues, any problems, the license is revoked. So if I were you, I would say, why would I want to take that chance with packaged liquor?
If I may, did he say that, or did he say it's got to be observed closely?
It says right here, if there's any disturbance at this location, range from shots, disturbance, fights, it
Oh,
doesn't,
okay.
it doesn't refer to the packaged liquor. I'm just thinking ahead.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it could happen, and it would come back and be an issue for them. And I was just wondering, if they wanted to open a nice restaurant, why take the chance? That's my question.
No, my attention is not to sell a six-pack, no package. But it was nice for me to have it, you know, that if there's any problem, like I say, it's no problem, I don't want it then.
Question for corporate counsel. If we say that there was a concern, is there a way to amend this to a Class B to remove the package, so it'll still go through tomorrow, or does that have to be a whole new hearing?
Well, the applicant could make a decision to request a downgrade of the license. You can't go the other direction without re-advertising. But that would be up to the applicant. Yeah.
That's okay, Judge.
What's that? Okay. I think I just heard a request to amend the application to a Class B.
That's correct.
All right. All right. So the vote tonight, tomorrow night will be on a request for a Class B license, which is on-premise consumption, no package sales. Right.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. See you tomorrow night.
The other item I'd like to move up on the agenda is under resolutions. It's item 233. It's the demolition and conveyance of 111 North Broadway to the All Saints Greek Orthodox Church. We have some representatives of the church here this evening. This is a piece of property that we obtained through tax sale and from unpaid taxes. It's directly adjacent to the church. We have a low bidder on the demolition of the property, which we will have to absorb the cost of that. And the church is offering to cover the expenses for the back taxes plus the appraised value of the property. And their plan is in the future to utilize it for additional church parking there. I believe improvements were not anticipated to be made immediately, but sometime in the future. And if you have any specific questions, their representatives are here.
Mr. Marcus, how are you?
Yes, I am behalf of the church council.
Okay.
Also with me, is, the president of the church. Our intention is to improve the area because we lost a lot of people. We bought the two lots next to the house, and we try to improve that one too. But without the house, I don't think so we can improve that one. It's not gonna happen tomorrow, but we try to survive. We have plans years ago to move. It looks like now make a decision, we're gonna stay on Broadway, but we have to improve the area to stay. More for safe, for us, and I believe if we take the house down, it'll be easy for the city. We have every Sunday police there. Also, have any night we have meetings, we have to have security. So we try to improve the area.
Okay. Before I ask for questions, Mr. Marcus, would you give your address, please, for the record?
526 Bethany Drive, Sherwood, Illinois. I moved to Sherwood 5 years ago. I was here for 6 years. If you would like to know, 1960, exactly here, I bought the first liquor store.
Okay.
Super liquor.
Any questions? No. Comments? Naming it. With no questions, you want to make a comment?
No, I just, I want to thank, my name is Helen Wallace. I'm president of the All Saints Parish Council, and we had agreed to have Mr. Micus act on our behalf to negotiate on the church's behalf for the property across the street. Our church has a vested interest in the neighborhood. We will be there in 2016 for 100 years. So I don't think we're going to be going anyplace anytime soon. We really want to make our property and the neighborhood as safe and as nice as possible. We've just redone our parking lot. We do have an agreement with the Bicentennial Park within the city. They use our parking lot for any events that they carry on down there. We do want our parishioners to want to come down to 102 North Broadway. We've had to employ security every Sunday and for all events, and it's a costly venture for our church, but it's one that we feel is necessary. We spend approximately $5,500 a year just for the security that we need, but we are willing to do that. So those are my comments, and I'd like to thank Mr. Mikas on behalf of our church.
Helen, would you please give your address also?
It's 24205 Cree Drive, Shanahan, Illinois.
Thank you. Any questions of Mrs. Wallace? No? Thank you. Jim?
The next item on the agenda this evening is a presentation. I know the council and committees have been entertaining proposals from marketing companies that are focused on trying to fill retail availability, and we're also going to review our work plan on economic development later, but I'd like to start off with presenting Steve Friedman of SB Friedman to talk about some of the things that his company provides, and then later we can talk about how that may tie into our work plan in the economic development area. So, Steve?
Thank you very much, Jim, Mayor, members of the council. Jim invited me to come speak with you to share some of our insights on the use of incentives and some of the other issues that you are beginning to encounter, and you have encountered in many cases over the years as you've been involved in economic development, and as you increase your involvement, some of the tools and tactics that you might want to be using and want to use. As Jim indicated, we do provide services in this area, so this is sort of I tried to describe this to my wife. I said it was an infomercial. Okay. So what we wanted to do, what we thought we would do tonight is to talk about how incentives can be used to help achieve economic development goals of a city, of a community. Joliet is poised, we think, and has many opportunities today that it did not have 10 years ago, and did not have in some ways 5 years ago. The one I like to cite most often is the completion of I-355, which changes the location of downtown Joliet. Now, how can that be? It's always been in the same place according to a GPS system, but when you get off of I-355 at I-80, before you're off the interchange, it says next 7 exits Joliet. Previously, if you didn't know to come from Chicago down 94 to 57 and take 57 to 80, but you came from the western suburbs, you took 55 and you got off at the Louis Joliet Mall, where there, in my opinion, there might as well have been a sign that says, be patient to get to downtown Joliet. The next 20 minutes will be quite painful. So you have changed that. That changes the position of downtown, and I think creates a lot of opportunities for downtown. The inland port creates opportunities. I don't think we know yet what they are. Some of them are deeply embedded in economic structure and in the interactions and supply chain issues, and in fact in the secondary consulting and business affairs that relate to the amount of traffic coming through the inland port. Inland port is only 10 years old, 12 years old. We also are adjacent to and a part of the Route 66 corridor, and in work we recently did, we were part of the team that worked on the 53 corridor study. There's fabulous recreational opportunities for the entire region there that nobody yet knows about, but which, if people work and move forward, will become apparent. You're located in a robustly growing county with a huge amount of opportunity, much of it being captured by the central city, the city as a geographic municipal entity, not always necessarily where you want it to be. And then you have the finally somewhat reviving real estate markets, and I know that you have had many requests for assistance. So we're going to want to talk a little bit about why the public sector helps private projects, approaches to helping them, key issues to consider, and tools and techniques for doing that, and a couple case studies, and close with some recommended practices. So why are public entities asked to get involved in public-private partnerships and in providing assistance? I don't frankly like the word incentives, although there are times when what you are doing is truly incenting, but assistance to make a private project work. And some of it's on the private side. The landowner is stuck with property owner holdouts that can make the cost of a property 3 or more times its value. So the public sector gets asked to help with site assembly. We have the history of our industrial economy underground that leads to a lot of unknowns and a lot of problems with remediation. And we even have what are known as urban soils in neighborhoods, which are they may not be contaminated, but if there was a prior building, it was too often just dumped in the cellar hole and filled with a few inches of dirt, and creates a building condition that is extraordinary in its cost. So we have site preparation issues. We have a developer trying to deal with public desires for how the buildings should be built and what they should look like in order to maintain the community character. Mismatches of what they want to do with the current market conditions, but the public sector wants to do something that is more grand, that will help to change an image, that will help to turn around an area, be catalytic, be more significant. And then, if we did not learn in the last several years how important financing markets are to anybody's real estate venture, public or private, we should have learned it since 2009. But on the public side, we have things that we want to achieve. We have visions that are grander than the most basic private sector vision, and certainly than the current use of many buildings, where the building itself is creating some value to the private owner, but to the public sector, a 5, 6, 7-story building would produce a lot more value, a lot of people, a lot of tax revenue. In the downtown, it would produce customers for retail, et cetera. And these things are not in match with the private economy. We have preferred land uses. Retail is the most highly preferred land use by every municipality in Illinois because of our sales tax structure. It is not necessarily so in other places, but our sales tax sharing structure, where percent comes back to the municipality, makes apt electronics the highest and best use of every piece of land in Illinois. Apt electronics, according to Cranes 2 weeks ago, there's $398 million in sales volume in one location. Part of that service, but at least $300 million of it is subject to sales tax, I'm sure. That's a distortion, but it is part of the reality of running a municipality. And then municipalities are concerned with with the fiscal impacts, and you have fiduciary responsibilities. Any money that comes through the public sector should be, and must really by law, be carefully scrutinized as to how it is spent. Whether the specific tool sets up specific parameters or not in the economic development area, you have fiduciary responsibility to make sure all money that is spent and passes through the public sector is spent properly and well. Which leads to a lot of conflicts with developers who will say, that's my TIF. I'm creating that TIF. That's my taxes. They should all come back to me. That is in direct conflict with the fiduciary responsibility of a public entity. And then, in addition, the public sector wants to bring job growth and other values as a result of economic development. So the approaches to municipalities getting involved range from being highly reactive to being more proactive. And we're going to talk a little bit about those issues and some of the key issues that we think are important when you consider how to get involved. We think that it's important to think about whether the project involved achieves important public goals. Is this project going to help improve a whole area? Is it going to be catalytic? Is it going to be in support of a plan, of a series of goals that have to be economically attainable and viable, but nonetheless that reflect the public's goals and objectives? Are the people you're working with people who have the capacity? Whether you went out and sought a developer or whether a developer approached you, do they have the capacity to carry out the project, financial and experiential? Does the project actually need assistance? Is there a financing gap in any project? And what's the appropriate structure for providing that assistance? Or alternatively, if it's often an industrial project or a retail project at the edges of your city, are you fighting a competitive battle where you are then really providing an incentive to locate in your city? Does it create precedents? One of the longest precedent discussions I ever had was about Union Station in Chicago, and it was on the question of landmarking the roof line or not. There are columns inside Union Station with copper caps on them with screws, plain old slot-headed screws, holding the caps onto these columns because the building was designed to build a tower on top of it. So if you landmarked the roof line, you were creating the precedent that things that had a roof line as it was today should never be built upon in an historic building. But what other precedent was there? Where else were you going to go up on the roof with a really big slotted screwdriver and unscrew the caps and just weld beams on and go up? So eventually, the city was persuaded not to landmark the roof line because it wasn't creating a precedent. But that's one of the issues also you can run into. Will the project be fiscally positive in the long run? Is the level of risk that you're taking appropriate? And how do you do the project so that you can assure that you have performance and success from the project? Okay. Just some of the tools that are available for assistance. The big four in Illinois are tax increment financing, special service areas, business districts, and economic incentive agreements, otherwise known as sales tax sharing. But we also have enterprise zones. We have allocations of new markets tax credits held by other entities. You do not have your own, but that are available for projects in the state of Illinois, and you have a number of census tracts that are qualified in Joliet. We have the ability to use the low-income housing tax credit program and home funds in creative ways that help support economic development as well as strictly housing. And a lot of other state and federal grants. There's actually been a lot of increase in activity on the federal level particularly. And a lot of local things that you also have control over, how you use your zoning, whether you can streamline the review process, providing public land into a project, providing alleys or streets that are in ways that can be used, or other land that's come into the city's ownership. How you use your public facilities. You can use public facilities as anchors in a neighborhood or downtown. And then some things that allow you to improve the cash position without tapping the major programs. And any jurisdiction in Illinois, any governmental body can abate any tax that it levies. And we've actually used that. We actually, because of the Cook County, Will County tax situation, we actually got one of the school district in Tinley Park to abate for 10 years 35% of the property taxes CarMax was going to have to pay, because they wanted to see cars sold rather than to have children grown on that land that they'd have to educate, because that's what farmland in Cook County would otherwise produce, was houses. Over the recent years, financing has become more complex and requiring a lot of sources. The map here shows the tracts that are new markets eligible in red in Joliet, so there are areas where we can certainly use that tool. And the other chart shows the layered financing involved in a deal that had new markets tax credits in it for a mixed-use project in a Chicago neighborhood, one of the more complicated deals. But we've actually heard of deals with even more layers, a dozen layers of financing. This particular project has TIF, and just on the takeout side, the right side of the chart is the permanent financing. There was a state energy grant. There's TIF cash, which in this case it came from an existing district. Otherwise, you'd have to find a way to monetize it. Low-income housing tax credit equity, public housing capital funds, NSP, which was a federal program that's now not there anymore, and a TIF loan and some residential mortgage. And I guess we had, in one of these projects, we had a layer of, in the commercial, this is the residential piece, then this was on top of a commercial piece that also had a new markets tax credit layer in it. So this is the complexity that we see today as we do this. A couple projects that just illustrate some of the roles and activities that we've seen communities get involved in. The Shops and Residences of Uptown Park Ridge, a project that was done in the administration prior to Jim's in Park Ridge. It was finished on Jim's watch. The city needed to replace a reservoir, and they wanted to catalyze revitalization of their downtown that they call Uptown. And they had to be very proactive. They had the reservoir land and they had a parking lot, but they bought 2 car dealerships, moved them within the city to keep the sales tax, and then they bought some other land and worked through the process of deciding what they wanted on the site. We helped them create what we call a believable fiction of a development program, and then went through a competitive developer solicitation and negotiations to come up with a planned development that put 5 levels of parking underground in the former reservoir, expanded, and then 168 or 170 residential units and about 80,000 square feet of retail space. And it has been, in fact, catalytic. And to do that, they had to bring to bear the funding to replace the infrastructure at a different location. They used the plan development tool to make sure they got the development that they wanted. They used tax increment and land sale. They both subsidized and pulled cash from the project. So they got money for the land, which repaid the general fund, which had acquired the land, but then they used TIF to help pay for all the extra parking that they wanted as a public matter as part of the project. And in order to try to manage their risk, they had an upside sharing provision as well, so that if the project was unusually successful, they would share in the upside. Save a lawsuit, it probably would have given them an upside, but a lawsuit delayed it for a year, and the project was profitable, but not that profitable. Now, a couple other cases where the heavy lifting, and I bring these up because as I look at your downtown and as I look on the riverfront north of the casino, there's sites that seem to me that they should be teed up for development. But what does that mean to tee them up for development? It isn't just putting a sign on them. It is addressing ownership. It's addressing site remediation. It's addressing any improvements that are no longer useful and have really no economic value to the future development, but are an albatross in the current development. And a couple of towns that have dealt with pretty tough projects include Bartlett, which is a very small suburb, fairly small suburb, and it has had some manufacturing right adjacent to its downtown area. It was dirty dirt. It was polluted. They took the responsibility to buy it up, to clean it up, to get an NFR, and then they did a developer solicitation that created the Bartlett Town Center, which you see pictured on the left. In Des Plaines, in 1978, they, I think they would admit that they made a mistake. They built the barrel deck. Any of you ever been to Des Plaines and saw the barrel deck? I think, without a doubt, the ugliest parking deck in the entire region. I don't think you could find an uglier one. And I started visiting Des Plaines in 1981, and they told me they were going to tear it down. Well, when we started on this project with them in 1995, the mayor said, we're going to tear it down. I said, when? He said, why do you ask? I said, because if you've been telling everybody that for 15 years that I know of, if you're really going to tear it down, you'll send and you tear it down now, you'll send a signal to the market that you're serious. Well, the mayor, being a business guy, understood that. He said, okay, we got it torn down. We needed to pave something for replacement parking. We got the paving done. The paving contractor kept their plant open into November to pave it. And we paved it, we moved the parking, we tore the thing down, and then we went out on the street to create, to attract developers for what became the Library Plaza, which actually the street wall on the adjacent blocks was restored. The library protrudes a little bit into that. The plaza is a mixed-use space. There's parking, which is for the stores and not actually for the transit, but it's transit-oriented area. But the parking lot is used as a French market, as a gathering place, as a festival place, all through on the weekend. So there's this mixed-use, joint use of the space, and it's very successful. The city's heavy lifting, though, was they tore down that deck. They had bought the Des Plaines Mall, which we converted to parking, and they did the land assembly and the things that were necessary to be ready to be able to present a site to the market in a form in which a developer could address it and a developer could do something with it. And that is a critical concept, I believe, when you come to later on working to implement your downtown plan particularly. That is, I think, one of the critical concepts that you're going to need to think about. A couple of others. We talk about the retail, and there's an example in the region where, frankly, the municipality went to capture that retail because otherwise it was going to the adjacent municipality, and they did whatever they needed to do it. And they provided a sales tax sharing agreement that successfully landed the project and captured the retail market to their town where they got to use the sales tax. And that's something that you often have to do if you're going to play in that game. I wish we didn't have to play in that game, but if you're going to, you're not going to find that that kind of project has a financing gap. The internal rate of return on the project involved was very high. They didn't need help from that standpoint. They needed it because they could get it. And the law in Illinois sets you up to have to make that deal by the way the sales tax comes back to you, and that you are allowed to share it with the developer, sets you up for that request, and you will find that you have faced that, I think, and you will face it, and you can negotiate as best you can to keep it as short as possible, and to share only a portion of it so you enjoy great benefits. A very small deal, a gas station, and you'd think that normally you wouldn't help a gas station. After all, that's a pretty basic market. But in a particular case involved in this community, the piece of land was being bought from a church, and the price was pretty high. And in order to capture the gas station and provide both the public service and the capture some of the sales tax revenue involved in fuel tax revenue, some help was given. Again, it was measured against how much you needed to do to match that land price problem. You had an extraordinary cost that you couldn't get out of, and that's what you matched and measured the assistance to, and not an arbitrary factor, but something you're able to measure and see. So that's another one of the techniques that we've seen used and have used. The practices that we recommend for a community trying to provide, to in a sense, play in this game. We have to do it in certain kinds of circumstances. We need to both be proactive and reactive. We don't want to, in doing incentive tool and using tools and doing development projects, you can't just say, well, just come in on November 15th once a year, and that's when we'll consider it. The private market doesn't work that way. People get site control, they get their projects up and ready, they get a tenant, they get things in at different times, and so you need to be in a position to be reactive. But on the other hand, you're going to have other projects where you can be proactive, where you can go out and seek a developer, and you can set up how you're going to do that. And I think it's important to set up transparent procedures so people know how you're going to go about this, what you're going to do when they come in with a request, what kinds of projects you're interested in seeing, what kinds of assistance you will consider doing, and what kinds of areas coming out of your economic development strategy you want to be proactive about, that you're going to go out and seek development and developers. The city needs its own advisors. Now, this is the commercial. This is the infomercial part. But this is what this is what we do. We provide an independent, objective source to review projects and to structure deals. But why do you need your own advisors? And sometimes it's at your expense, and sometimes you can pass some of it to the developer. It's not like a suburban zoning case where you can pass many costs to the developer. It's a little different because they are dealing with difficult problems. Sometimes the prize at the end is big enough that they will agree to pay the cost. But usually in the center city and redevelopment, the city is paying the cost. But if you think about almost anything that you buy and engage in, you need to know and want to know when you're negotiating the other guy's point of view better than he does. Whatever it is, you want to know what he's thinking, what his problems are, and what his motivation is as well or better than he does. And the only way to get that is to have your own analysis done, and to the extent that it exceeds the skill sets that you have on staff, then outside advisors are a way to do that, so that you have at your table people who can help you to understand and to look at what you really need to do as opposed to what the developer is necessarily asking to do and help in the negotiation process. And it needs to be objective. It needs to be something that is not contingent fee-based, because that compromises objectivity. It needs to be based on an objective review. Most important thing in the recent years, and has also been even more important than ever, is understanding the capacity of the development team. People have shifted around. They've scrambled around. People have gone broke. And some people have gone broke honorably, and those are people that will find themselves doing work again. They will find the same lenders. They may find somebody else to be the guarantor, but they'll be back in business. There's other people who don't have the financial capacity. And you need to look at both where they've been and where they are now, and what the structure is and who their partners are, in order to assure that they have the financial capacity, and then that they have the actual technical capacity as well to accomplish a project. The terms, obviously, you're not going to accept the first offer that anybody or request somebody makes, so you need to do that. And then as you get through that, we always like to do a term sheet first and then go to the documentation, the redevelopment agreement or other agreements that are necessary to make sure that you're going to get what you intend to get. In most redevelopment projects, it's a combination of a redevelopment agreement and the plan development agreement, which often go through the city council at the same time, the same night, in order to make sure you're getting what you agreed to, what you want to get, and then establishing procedures for monitoring disbursements and ongoing compliance to make sure that the project is being carried out in accordance with what you intended to get and in accordance with the law, because the law does have certain requirements about, in the case of TIF, reimbursement, meeting prevailing wage, and then you may have policies on minority and women-owned businesses and other things that you also will want to ensure are being met. And so that's what I wanted to share with you this evening, and we'd be happy to discuss these thoughts with you, and any questions or comments you might have.
Jim, you have any comments before?
No, if you've got some questions for Mr. Friedman at this point, they'd be appropriate. I've asked him to stay as we review our economic development work plan, though, so that if any further questions you might have for him, he could potentially answer it at that point in time.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I do actually. Thank you for your presentation, by the way. It was very informative. But Jim, is this part of the strategic plan? Is Mr. Friedman looking to do some business with the city of Joliet as far as marketing our city? I'm just trying to figure out the relationship here, exactly what
I've worked with Mr. Friedman in the past.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
As he mentioned, he was already complete with the project in Park Ridge when I started there in 2008, and then I was given the task of filling all of that vacant commercial property that was built. So, but throughout that succeeding years, he did assist the city in finding and also trying to promote that development. I'm also familiar with the work that he's done in other cities and talked to other city managers in those locations, and they've been very pleased with his work. I believe that at times, from what I've seen so far, that the city is on the more reactive side of the equation, and I think we could use some outside help on that proactive side, because I think that is something that was brought up in the strategic plan, that we want to be ready when development's ready. And also, I believe, as Steve said, if you've got properties teed up and ready to go, that sends a message to the market that we're much more cooperative, much more eager, and will be looked on more favorably than other communities.
I agree. I think if we're gonna be successful, we probably do have to be a little bit more proactive with respect to being competitive. I guess what I would suggest, Your Honor, is that possibly Mr. Friedman should maybe start out at the Economic Development Committee and work through the committee structure, so we can kind of drill down on some of the details of his proposal and that sort of thing. And then at some point in time, possibly an RFP would be in order. But I do think the appropriate thing to do would be to start out at the Economic Development Committee, unless you disagree.
No, that's fine. I'm going to thank you also. I was at the Historical Museum when the presentations were made to help City Center Partnership develop. Was that your group?
We were one of them. We were one of the
I thought
proposers
so.
for downtown,
I
yes.
thought so.
Yeah.
But did your group end up being the finalists?
No, we did not win.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I agree. Maybe you need to come to Economic Development Committee meeting, and we can discuss it and go from there.
Mayor, just a comment.
Sure.
Since you presented this as an infomercial and it went just as much as long, do we get the deal at $19.99 if we act now?
Sure.
Yeah, right.
But to answer your part of your question, Mr. Girl, yes, I am interested in doing work with the city, and this was done as both for the purpose of marketing, but also for the purpose of providing you with some information. So.
And that is completely fine. I have no problem with that. I guess what I want to make sure of, and I think it's more appropriate for you to go to the Economic Development Committee, is that, what would your relationship be with some of the other consultants that we've hired? As the mayor has mentioned, we have a consultant that's working on downtown redevelopment with the City Center Partnership. I want to make sure that there's, that there's no conflicts, and we're not doubling up, if you will, on services that we've already had. But I think those questions, as I said, that's why we have a committee structure here, and the committee can drill down on those questions and bring that back to the city council.
Well, if I could comment on that. In Des Plaines, we were implementing a downtown plan that was actually prepared by Camiros. So the relationship between what we do and we do downtown plans, but we also go farther into the implementation of a plan and implementation of a project. Similarly, in Park Ridge, there had been what they called a sub-area plan prepared by the consulting firm of Turkle Pettigrew, Allen and Payne, which is no longer in existence. So also, they had a plan, they had a concept, they had this area is, something should happen here. And then we took it to the next level. We took it to the level of defining a development and working with the city officials to make sure that it was teed up and ready to go and ready to be something that a developer could deal with. So we act as that bridge. There's an article in your packet that is a reprint from Public Management Magazine, which is the magazine of the International City Management Association, that talks about the developer solicitation process and and it's based on the Park Ridge and Des Plaines and Bartlett cases, but features heavily Park Ridge. So that outlines that process. And in every one of these cases, in Bartlett, there was a downtown plan in place by TESCA. So the general planners often come first, and then we follow. So there's not directly a conflict. There's really no conflict. We go into, we have a real estate expertise as well as a planning expertise, so we go into the heart of the real estate deal and dealing with the developers.
Mr. Friedman, what differentiates you from Buxton and retail strategies, et cetera?
We are not primarily in the business of marketing to the retailers. Our role is more likely in taking the project opportunities and figuring out what is really able to be supported in the market as usually a mixed-use project involving residential as well as retail, and then taking that out to the development community and working with the developers. Buxton and the other one, I've heard the name, but I don't.
Retail strategy.
Yeah. So when we go to figure out what the site is good for and how much retail it can support, we're going to look at some sources that are similar to theirs, and we're going to look at the demographic support, the bodies, the households, the income, and so on, and we're going to look at the retail requirements of typical retailers. But we will come to that, use that as a basis of talking about the kind of retail that should be sought and the size of the retail that's part of the project. We have not undertaken what Buxton does, we don't go out and directly market usually an area or a downtown or a community to the retailers. We actually think that it's more productive to build relationships with the retail brokers, the Mid-Americas, the Jones Langs, the C.B. Richard Ellis, and so on, and let them help you market to the end-use retailers. But that's fine. That's what they do. They do that particular thing. We're looking at retail from a different perspective, from the perspective of what kind of development do you want to build to have the retail product that maybe they still are there to help you sell. We're not necessarily doing the same thing that they're doing. They're talking about, you've got retail product. We're talking about you got a piece of dirt or you have a deteriorated site that has some building on it. What do you do to get that to a position where it can actually be used and they can tenant it, or Jones Lang can, anybody, whoever is doing that can tenant it. We're a step before that, creating product, helping create the product.
Councilman?
Thank you, Mayor. No, Councilwoman, I think you get to make 4 easy low payments, and you get a free set of Ginzu knives. So.
Plus free shipping.
There you go. My question to you, Mr. Friedman, is in thinking of our Economic Development Committee and something that we truly want to head towards, and that's creating a comprehensive economic development plan. I understand what you're saying is your company will, as you put it, identify a piece of dirt and help develop it. Do you see yourself fitting in, and Jim, that's something for you to weigh in too, with the Economic Development Committee and putting together kind of like a 5-year rolling comprehensive plan and identifying many pieces of dirt and what we want to define them to become?
We can certainly do that kind of work. And we've done detailed development planning for a number of communities where we tend to identify a lot of projects. So we've worked on the downtown plan in Oak Park in the early 90s and identified with our planning partner, it was Lakota Group, identified 25 projects that were critical projects that they were then able to pursue the implementation of. So that we could work with your strategy and your goals and bringing that down to the land area that's in the community. So that, yes, we could help identify those projects and prioritize them and look at how you would take them forward.
And Jim, that's something I'd like to see maybe that you can bring to the Economic Development Committee at the next, maybe not the next meeting, maybe the meeting after, but maybe bring a presentation just for that as well.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I just want to comment to Mr. Haag. I want to thank you. I think I've kind of been the one that's been the driving force with kind of doing that menu. If I understand this correctly, and kind of jump in, one of the things that I've heard in the campaign and currently is, and I always use Romeoville, the village is kind of a benchmark. You go on their website, they got a menu bar of offers that they give their developers or folks out there looking to develop in their municipality. And we really don't have any ordinances on the books or necessarily the right incentives per se that allows you to go out to sell, am I correct, to developers, maybe expanding TIF districts. I know there was some discussion about expanding TIF districts around Jefferson Street and Larkin, around the medical district. Am I correct? That's kind of what they would come in and do, and take a look at the entire city. Not only look at the incentives, I know you don't like that word, but look at opportunities for potential public-private partnerships.
And if you give me an opportunity right now, we'll take a look at the work plan, and that's exactly one of the issues.
And yes, we do that. We also create all those districts that are required under Illinois law, so we do all that work, as well as the analysis of the deals and the structuring of the transactions with the private sector.
Thank you, Mr. Frederick. Sure.
Roger Thompson, 1110 Nicholson. I would like to know what your view is of the potential for tourism in Joliet, and at what stage that might come in to your plans.
I think the question was heard about tourism, and I think I mentioned early on that we had been involved in the Illinois 53 corridor study, which ended up with a very significant tourism and recreation focus. I think that the enhancement and growth of tourism and recreation can come, but it will come incrementally. There are some fabulous resources. You sort of start with the museum and the Route 66 theme. That is fine, but it's very narrow, very limited. It's well known worldwide, but the number of people who actually come to go to Route 66 is minuscule compared to the number of people who come to the Speedway, and who could come to the area south of here to fish, to hunt, to bike, to study the prairie, which the tallgrass prairie is being restored, and so on. So Joliet, first of all, the city goes south, so that from a tax standpoint, some of the area would be benefited. But I can't remember exactly how far you go, but I think is the Speedway in your city limits? Yeah, and the Autobahn is in your city limits. So a lot of that's in your city limits already, so you get some of that benefit. But there's also no really good place to create the services that would really support that tourism at this point. And so there's some opportunity. There is some need for hotels if we can find a site. The Chicago Street interchange is one of the few interchanges along I-80 that doesn't have a hotel. But it's hard to see where the site is for that hotel. So there would be some possibly heavy lifting, or we had a client once who was an amateur chef, and he liked to make omelets, and I always used the metaphor breaking eggs to make an omelet. And he actually put his picture on his village website showing him breaking eggs to make an omelet, but as a metaphor for the heavy lifting for a development project. But so incrementally and gradually we can begin to build up that recreation. The tourism experts who are on that team felt we needed to start with day trippers and trying to find the services and support to attract the day trippers and to make them comfortable coming in and out, because there's a huge market that we have access to, in part because of I-355 coming through. But it's going to be incremental and gradual. One of the proposals in that final plan was to create individual SSAs, special service areas, around each of the attractions, and have each of those SSAs hire the same entity to do the marketing, event management, and support services that were needed to help begin to build the tourism. So I think it can come, but it's going to take a lot of people working together, and it's going to take some time. But there's some fabulous recreational resources just to your south, and you can be the anchor for it.
Thank you.
I really like the breadth of this presentation. It's encompassing.
Okay.
I think it's valuable.
Okay. Just quickly, we were creating an SSA for the piece of property at 80 and 55 which was going along fine until the economy, where the lifestyle mall was supposed to go, but then the economy went to pot. So, Jim?
Thank you. First of all, I want to apologize. I didn't realize till about an hour ago that you didn't have an advance copy of what I'm presenting to you. This should have gone out with the agenda, so this evening I think I'll kind of glean over this presentation because I want you to have an opportunity to digest it and think about it, because staff needs your feedback to make sure that these are the things that you think we should be working on to achieve our goals in our strategic plan. So in the area of economic development, we've got 4 categories. The first one is the first initiative is the downtown development strategy, and we're well on our way with hiring Camiros and his group. The City Center Partnership's been involved, and we had a kickoff meeting late in April. At this point, there is going to be the development of the actual planning process, interviews of the public, the key stakeholders in the downtown area. They'll develop a strategy, and then that should be completed and presented late in this calendar year. And then we've got implementation of the plan. And that was something that Councilman Girl brought up during those discussions, that we need to make sure that key projects are identified out of this development plan, and that we will continue to partner with the City Center Partnership and make sure that we address it in our annual budgeting process. We decide on a plan for implementation, how much we're going to do each year, and make sure that it's not something that sits on the shelf, which is something none of us want to see happen. The next one is the incentive strategy. We've got a tax increment finance plan, and what we're talking about is developing a new downtown TIF. The values of the property were fairly low at the time it was first established, and I think there are 8 or 9 years left in a 23-year period. Well, when 2008 came along, the property values fell, and so now what you do is you capture the difference between the current value and the improved value. But the existing values, there's not that much difference, and there's not much to capture. So we want to make sure that we're talking about a new TIF which captures the increased values, and we think there'll be a benefit in that. Possibility of establishing a business improvement district. This is where we can have a tax within the district that the businesses would approve. There's the enterprise zone. We're part of the Des Plaines River Valley Enterprise Zone, and that is going to be expiring this year, and so we need to decide whether or not we want to continue to be part of that, and we need to file with DCEO on that program. We're looking at a residential development incentive program. Again, this is trying to create some kind of incentive to infill some of the subdivisions that just kind of fell off the map, so to speak, in 2008, 2009. A lot of developers' properties went back to the banks, and so we want to review that and make recommendations to you in that area. And also organize, as a business attraction, organize a task force of existing developers that have a presence here in Joliet, and ask them for their assistance and their feedback, and serve on a task force that can help us develop that marketing program that we want to implement. Third area is improvement in the administration, which we're talking about here is a staffing level analysis, and then reviewing our policies and procedures internally, something to increase our ISO rating, the Insurance Service Office, which is a benefit to all businesses and determines what you pay as a business or a residence in term for property insurance. We'd look at updating our ordinances and establishing a contractor registration program, and then also evaluating and updating the zoning ordinance. Interagency coordination, working with the Will County CED and other state agencies, and other goals that we believe should move us further along. Then finally, we've got the legislative agenda, and I've got new downtown TIF here again, because we decided that we need assistance from our state legislators and need their support. Whenever you're establishing a new TIF, you're also capturing school taxes, county taxes, so we want to have those meetings, and we need their buy-in to the process, and maybe some dual meetings with some of the school boards, with the city council, and also the legislation that will have to be adopted by you for a new TIF. We're also talking about the Joliet prison as far as stabilization and offering tours there. Just this morning, Representative Walsh sent the mayor and myself a proposal to sell both the west prison and the east prison to the city for $10. Apparently the legislation on tax credits for empty state sites for renovation of those sites has fallen by the wayside and isn't going to be passed, so he's trying to directly address our concerns. I'm also going to be sharing with the head of Department of Corrections and representative of the governor's office the plan, so that we can set up a conference call and talk about it. So that's one of the major items. Also, the U.S. Steel property, identifying the environmental issues, making sure that the property's secure and it's allowed to, all remediation is complete, so that, again, we can tee up that property for redevelopment.
Jim, have we heard any more from them? I know our
No, I
attorney
haven't
sent
heard
the letter.
anything
No.
from our attorney at all.
Okay.
In terms of a response to the FOIAs.
Okay.
So, ONS property at I-55 and I-80 is a property that we need to address. And also lobbying our legislative agenda at the state level for property, redevelopment and property development. And last but certainly not least is maintaining the county courthouse in downtown Joliet and working to achieve those goals. If there are any questions on economic development at this time, they'd be appropriate, or maybe questions again for Mr. Friedman.
Jim, for you, a question. And on the first page, we discussed several things with the downtown.
Yes.
And we've really focused on that. And let me make it clear that of all the things we've discussed tonight, the county courthouse is extremely important. I'm just curious, are we working on something similar? Are we working on initiatives for the rest of the city? Because there's economic development needed throughout the city.
Yes. On the second page that I've got up there now, the first item, tax increment financing, also under there says to evaluate the potential for the creation of other TIF districts in the community, as Councilman McFarland had mentioned, that we need to study that and see where other areas need some kind of boost of some sort, and take a look at those.
Okay, and are we also, are we creating a mechanism to truly, really drill down and investigate and try to secure, things like grants? Mr. Friedman had mentioned earlier that there's, in his opinion, being in the field, there's been an uptick in federal programs, are we really drilling, are we going to put something together there so that we have somebody from staff or an outside consultant who can really drill down on those?
Yes, we've utilized Will County CED in that regard, in some of the proposals that they've had, and they've made application, and we've gotten some grants that have benefited. But yeah, that is something that we don't have people on staff at this moment that spend time, looking at those grants.
Now, I understand there's consultants out there that will do such things, and actually their commission, if you will, their pay is based on the grants they actually secure. So can we possibly add that to?
Sure.
Okay, that's all I have, thanks.
Anybody else?
Jim, if you can go back to, I don't know if it was a third slide, just to discuss a little bit about the old prison. You said the east and the west side prison. Is that the McDonough Street facility and the Collins Street?
Just the Collins Street.
Okay.
But-
So
but we're-
what's the initial, the city would then take ownership of it?
Yes. Ownership also means liability,
Right.
and that's a concern. We know that the west side prison, the roof collapsed a few weeks ago in the central administrative building in the corner of it, and it was brick, and it knocked out all 3 floors and crashed all the way to the basement. There's $1.3 million was the estimated repair cost of the roof for that entire structure. As part of the tour, we were not going to allow people to enter the building. You can view it from the outside by looking in where the guards used to be, and they were protected behind bars and glass, and they could put a gun through a turret and look up and down as well as this way. And so visitors could look at the old cells but not be exposed to the leaded paint that's peeling everywhere.
I just have some concerns of the city. Is an initiative, us taking ownership of the facility with the amount of work that's needed. I think we're gonna be discussing capital improvements at Silver Cross Field. We have, other properties that I think we need to maintain currently. I do want to see the old prison, utilized, but I don't know if it's necessarily the city's job to take ownership and to push that through. I mean, I'd like to be the conduit to maybe work with private development or the museum or somebody, but for the city. And then just to add on to that, and then we'll move on, is I like to see something here with the old Silver Cross site. I think that whole area out there is being forgotten. We did just approve a little bit of development, hopefully with funding to go through. But I think that should be a definite item on here to try to redevelop that site.
Councilman, if I may, this legislation that we would acquire it for $10, we would have a year to develop it or have somebody develop it, and if we don't, it goes back to the state, so we're not locked into this. The only question that Jim and I talked about this we have is if we do open it up for tours, does that lock us in? And we need to find out before we accept it. Does that lock us in for the term of it, or can we get out of it after a year like the legislation says?
Because if it's unsafe, you're saying there's collapsing roofs in it, and we're taking people in there, I mean.
No,
That's in
you
there.
wouldn't, no,
that's
this would
there.
be inaccessible to the public,
Right.
the main area. The tour proposed was just to enter the courtyard, view the buildings from the outside. There's a couple buildings you can look into, but there wouldn't be any real entry into any buildings. Now, we haven't even been in on the east side prison, the old women's prison, but we've heard that that's fairly pristine. And so, again, before we consider it, we want to take a look at it.
Mayor, did I hear you right?
Pardon me?
Under the legislation, we're buying it for $10?
They're giving it to us for $10.
I don't think this is important, but it just caught my attention. Why not $1?
I don't know.
You know,
That's what the legislation, I
Where
don't
did
know.
$10 come from?
Hey, the state's hurting.
Okay, okay. It just caught my attention when you said that.
Anybody else? Jim?
All right, thank you, and we'll move on to the next area. Thank you, Mr. Friedman, and
Yes,
Jeff
thank you very
Dickinson, his
much.
associate, for coming this evening. Fiscal sustainability is the next area I wanted to review with you. The first area is our new software. We want to complete the implementation of our financial software, which will allow us to utilize a new general ledger program. Also, the completion of our utility management software. This is the Tyler Munis system. And then the third phase is the completion of the permitting, licensing, inspection, zoning, utilities, and the interactive software. That last one will allow our inspectors to be in the field with their laptop, to be able to conduct their inspection, to leave a printed copy on site, to immediately email the permit holder what needs to be done, and then people back in the office, actually the same day, the contractor can go out, make those fixes, and by the end of the day, call for a final inspection or a re-inspection. So it's all wirelessly connected in live time on the computer system, and so it will allow the inspectors to spend much more time in the field and be more productive. Next area is our payroll system that we've been talking about. We've got our project manager hired. We're addressing the deficiencies. Each end user we're training or will be training, and we'll begin live payroll in September, and then we will run a parallel system with the existing Ceridian payroll probably for the next several months, just to make sure everything's working correctly and there aren't any problems with time banks and so forth. So, third one is under fiscal sustainability is our budget document. I think it's real important that once we have the strategic plan in place, that we provide quarterly reports, annual reports to the City Council on the progress that's being made in not only financial, but in all of the areas that we're talking about here. But your budget, and this actually should make budgeting so much easier, because what I'm going to propose to you in the budget should tie back to every one of our items in our strategic plan. Otherwise, we have to ask ourselves, why are we funding this or thinking of funding this? It's not going to get us towards the goal that we want to achieve. So part of this, though, is I believe that we need a review of our compensation levels, and we need to utilize an outside consultant to have a compensation study completed. We also need to do our capital plans. Our capital improvement plan should be a 5-year plan and actually should be part of the budget document each year. And the ultimate goal is to submit the budget for the GFOA Award of Excellence, and that it meets certain criteria that every municipal budget in the country has, and anybody in the country can pick it up, open it up, understand it, and understand how the finance ties back to our strategic plan and the goals of the community. Final area is staffing. We're working on hiring our finance director. I'll be proposing an assistant finance director position to you, and potentially a budget analyst position. That won't be till the 2015. And we're utilizing an auditing company on a as-needed basis to help supplement in the absence of our finance director. Are there any questions or comments? And again, I presented this to you all at once, and you didn't have the opportunity before the meeting tonight to review it, so we'll take a look at this again at the next pre-council meeting when we review the other 3 categories, and I welcome your comments and feedback.
Questions, comments? Okay, thanks, Jim.
Why did we get rid of the budget and analyst in the first place? Why did we get rid of the budget and analyst in the first place?
Jim, could we move up, I see that their turn, 22714.
Sure. What number was that, Mayor?
22714.
Oh, the Center Point vacation property. 227. Yeah, this is a annexation agreement with the Center Point Port Authority of Will County. This goes back, was approved in October of 2013, and it will vacate a portion of Patterson Road, which will then become a private road. This is really to facilitate the development of a rail-based intermodal bulk facility and marine terminal to tie in the riverfront with the train, and it'll be looping around there. The other thing is they'll provide security to the site because they'll have either keyed entry or guarded access at each end of the road, and it's really not used by anybody except those people accessing the properties that, for the industries that are currently located there. And the petitioner is here.
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Hock. My name is Kevin Breslin on behalf of Centerpoint Properties and Centerpoint Joliet Terminal Railroad, LLC, which is the formal petitioner. The manager is correct. This is being accomplished pursuant to a kind of a pre-design for this action as contemplated in the annexation agreement when the property was brought into the city, at least the surface portion of the property. The primary driver behind the decision to vacate is to eliminate the need for the city to maintain what will become a rail bridge structure that will pass over Patterson Road. We actually will lower the profile of Patterson Road underneath what will become the rail spur that will come off the existing rail rights-of-way to the west of the subject site and in across the property to the easternmost portion of the development, which was where the rail facility will go. Obviously, in the future, as the marine terminal potentially develops, that's west of the railroad, but this could service that as well. So the desire was, it's physically necessary to install a rail bridge. It's the city's position to avoid the necessity of taking on another significant structure for maintenance purposes. So the suggestion was to vacate it, allow the private parties who are most responsible for the project, Centerpoint, to take responsibility for this portion of the road. We've worked out appropriate easements with all the adjacent property owners so that there'll be common use of this. The manager's correct. At some point in the future, we may make it actually a gated campus. It increases the profile of the facility, increases its marketability to the extent that it may actually have additional security under Homeland Security regulations. It'll improve the volume of trade that we think it'll attract to the site. Frankly, it's really exciting to see yet another railroad come into the inland port. It continues to grow robustly as we bring more and more commercial activity to the site. We also plan as many as 3 rail-served buildings that would actually be configured around the exterior of the bulk terminal. So we hope that it will produce not only additional rail traffic to the area, but obviously continue to spur vertical development within the park as we continue to diversify the number of rail opportunities that we've brought to the site. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. Any questions?
Just one bit.
Sure.
Jeff, from the legal standpoint, everything's city side?
Actually, from a legal standpoint, Kevin and I worked very carefully to make sure the vacation ordinance complies with the municipal code, and really this is the fruition of a request the city made when the original development was still being negotiated because of the need for some sort of grade separation between Patterson Road and rail. we don't want to own and maintain that grade separation. And so it made sense to vacate the road. There are just a few private property owners that are more than able and already have negotiated access rights between themselves. So the public no longer needs to have the maintenance responsibility for this right-of-way.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening.
Just reviewing a few other items on the agenda. Under position vacancies, we had 2 resignations by police officers in the police department. So we're asking to refill those budgeted positions. Then once again, we have the 1913 South Briggs Street annexation for the cold storage location. And I believe everything has been worked out there to the city's satisfaction and the applicant's satisfaction. Under ordinances and resolutions, number 226 is a vacation of an alleyway, which...
Excuse me, Jim.
Yes.
Does anybody want to speak on this 1913 Briggs Street? This is a public hearing, or they can speak tomorrow evening, whichever. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
All right. I'm sorry. We found that there's the Lincoln School building, built in 1930, was apparently over an unimproved alley. And so you'll see in the backup that we're proposing to vacate that alley so that the property can be properly recorded. Any questions on that? Then again, we've got the weed ordinance that's proposed to be amended that went to committee last time and is now back before you. We've got a few properties declared as public nuisance under 229.
Mayor,
Yes.
just I've had a couple calls on the 212 Emery. I was just curious, once this is approved, what's the time frame of the demolition?
Well, that'll be something that, we'll have to go to bid on, and we can probably, based on the evaluations, decide.
Couple months?
And what's,
All right, no problem.
budgeted, get it back before you for approval of those bids.
Thank you.
Sure. Item 234 is authorizing purchase on 311 Polson Place and also 649 North Bluff. And this is the kind that we like because we're getting a check totaling $33,000 as well as accepting the property so that they can assist in the demolition of these 2 structures. So kudos to Wells Fargo and taking care of our community, paying attention to it. We've also got item 235, which is a resolution approving the agreement with the Slammers and the use of the Silver Cross Stadium. The bids and contracts.
I'm sorry. That agreement is with the Miracle League, right?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Bids and contracts will be reviewed by the committee. And then tomorrow night, I've got a few other presentations on forestry plan to address our emerald ash borer the rest of this year and potentially in future years. Some of the issues that are coming up in terms of capital investment that's needed at Silver Cross Stadium, and I wanted to review briefly the command structure in the police department. Also, under new business, this was an item that Councilman Hugg had asked to be reviewed by committee. The Land Use Committee made a recommendation that the full council discuss this issue in terms of interpretation of the agreement that we have with our billboard company and what kind of uses can be advertised. So, and I've got a request for a very brief closed session.
You want to talk about,
We're going to talk about that tomorrow, right?
well, we can talk about, you just want to wait a little more night?
Yeah.
We can,
Yeah, I'm fine with
okay,
that.
that's okay.
Sure, thanks, Mayor.
All right, okay.
We do have a citizen to be heard.
Heard.
Robert?
Good evening, members of the council. Just reading the local newspaper in the patch. I'm the one that's on the patch that uses his name. I don't like to use fake names when I give my opinion. But there's been some discussion about the Open Meetings Act. In 1993, myself, Councilman Mike Turk, Warren Doris, and Manuel Palacios, with no public mention, took a tour of the Benton Street area. And it was very productive. Councilman Turk and Councilman Doris addressed some very serious issues that were occurring in that area, and it was very productive. But again, we only had Kim Irwin from the Joliet Herald News. There was no other residents besides myself and those three councilmen. There was no mention of a breach of the Open Meetings Act. And back then, as the mayor has pointed out a few times when he talks about Evergreen, when he was a fireman 23 years ago, the law was still applicable. 3 councilmen constituted a meeting. When some of you gentlemen go for a drink after a council meeting, if there's 3 or 4 of you, that could constitute a meeting. But whether business is discussed, that's a whole different issue. I think what's going on here, and we need to move beyond that, is politics. I'm a Democrat. I think politics should come into play when you're in a Democratic Republican primary. When I was at a Democratic function a few weeks ago, and your deputy liquor commissioner was there as well, I had Democrats approaching me who hold, powerful public offices and who have an impact on Joliet's economic development and on agreements that happen in the city. Larry Walsh Sr., Larry Walsh Jr. And when I have Democrats coming up to me telling me, well, you're kind of close to that McFarland guy and he's a Republican. Well, once you're elected to this public body, which is nonpartisan, shouldn't matter whether you have an R at your name, in the back of your name, or a D. And the mayor should know that very well because you've had Rosalie DeAndrea, who's a Republican, work closely with you, and you were a big supporter of Joe Shatina. The politics has got to stop, and I think that's what's happening here with this whole issue of this Open Meetings Act and the Evergreen Tour, where there were people from the area who actually were on that tour, and it needs to stop because it will affect the city. Your presentation you had here tonight, the direction the city manager is looking for economic development. If some of these office holders are holding grudges because someone happens to have an R behind their name or an I as an independent, that's ridiculous. You're 5 of you are going to run for re-election and the mayor, or election in one case, possibly, in 11 months. The voters will make that final decision based on your record, based on your how you've acted as in your respective position, how you've responded to the public. You'll be judged on that, not whether or not you support a Republican or a Democrat, but based on what you did for the citizens of this city. So we need to stop the politics. That needs to stop with respect to, particularly with this Open Meetings Act. Like I said, in 1993 we did that. There was no complaints or discussion about that because there was no election in 1993. There's an election coming up in 11 months, and we need to stop the politics and run on your record. 5 of you are running for re-election, or 5 of you are going to be maybe running in the mayor's office. Run on your record, run on your public statements, run on the things that you've stood for, and leave it at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need an executive session? Oh, I have one thing before tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., the Suburban Spotlight Channel 7 is going to be here in Joliet to televise from here, talking about our city, et cetera, et cetera. It's, they're on from 5 to 7 or something like that, but they are going to be at the Rialto at 5 a.m. in the morning. Okay? Motion for executive session.
Second?
It's been motioned and seconded to go into closed session to discuss personnel, collective bargaining, land acquisition, or conveyance pending or threatened litigation, after which meeting will be adjourned. Councilwoman Gavin? Aye. Councilman Girl?
Aye.
Councilman Hug? Aye. Councilman McFarland?
Aye.
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Otterkirk?
Aye.
Councilwoman Cloman? Aye. Councilman Turk?
Aye.
Mayor Durrani?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Spotlight.